2, I moved back there for about a 15-year stint.
York.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's where I first became aware of you. Okay,
That's
so
when I first started playing guitar.
huh?
That's when I first got into music
Yeah.
and other things.
Yeah. Other trouble. You're the person my mother warned me about. And
Yeah, yeah. A lot of
bless
people.
you for that. I live vicariously through you.
Well, at least you survived.
Yeah. You have some good stories, I'm sure. So,
Oh,
so what are you doing now? Like, how you doing? We'll leave the now for later. But how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. It's been slow, said with the COVID thing, but keep your chin up and stay busy and I feel great and I'm a happy man.
Okay, this is wonderful. This is great. Okay, so how did you get your start in music? So you moved back to Pennsylvania.
Yeah, yeah. I moved back to Pennsylvania. My mom loves music, and I'd go to her house, and she had a lot of musical instruments. She had a fiddle, she had a 5-string banjo, mandolin, saxophone. I think she had a trumpet, but she had this acoustic guitar that I was just drawn to, and I'd sit and play it on the porch, and then she also had a great record collection
All
that
right.
I would delve into rock and jazz and stuff.
So she listened to cool music.
She listened to cool music. She was into what I guess now would be called Americana, but she was into stuff from 50s, 60s, 70s, and she would take me to bluegrass festivals when I was a kid, and I'd watch these incredible players in the parking lot just sharing and trading, and I was just mesmerized.
Mm-hmm.
It was fascinating for me.
Yeah. As me. So you started playing guitar that was acoustic guitar that you got started
Yeah, yeah.
with.
She had an Alvarez Yairi that was a beautiful guitar, and it had a baseball bat neck, and but it played very well, stayed in tune, and then so I'd play that thing. Shortly after that, I bought an Ibanez Les Paul copy off of Johnny Reaver, if you know him.
I do. I got my son amplifier from him.
For $100, he sold me this Ibanez Les Paul copy,
Hmm.
a cheap Kingston amp, and a big muff pedal with all the knobs busted off. And I plugged it in and I cranked it up, and I was like, wow, this is fun.
Yeah.
And I was hooked ever since.
Yeah. So how old were you then?
I was about 14.
14 when you got started.
14 when I started noodling around. I'd learned a bunch of parts of songs, but I really didn't learn any whole songs till a couple years later when I had to.
Okay.
And I would just play leads, and I had a chord encyclopedia, so I'd try to play all these crazy chords and just try to absorb knowledge.
Yes. That's you always wondered you kind of I wouldn't say it started late in life, but I started when I was 9, but
Wow.
you went once you got into it, you got into it
Well,
because you were
I
probably 21, 22 when I first met you. I don't know. I don't even know if you remember that.
I'm sorry, Rob, I really don't.
I
But
don't. I don't blame you because it was a music scene or whatever.
at the
You worked at
music
the
store, yeah,
yeah. You
at the
worked at the music. It was. I think it was called the music scene or something.
music scene, then listening booth, it changed hands.
Yeah.
I was there for 8 years. I started that job when I was 18 in '78, and I was there for 8 years until I moved to California. It was a great. It didn't pay well, but it was a great job to have, and it gave me a lot of time to practice on the job. It gave me access to better gear, to instructional material, to sheet music,
Yeah.
and it gave me a way to network and promote.
Yeah.
That was important before the internet.
That is funny that like you're as an 18-year-old, you're that forward thinking.
it's something I wanted to do, and I wanted to succeed at it.
Yeah,
So I picked a lot of brains, and I've watched how people did it that were doing well.
yeah.
And but I had some friends from school that were capable. This one guy, Jack Shank, I don't know if you ever heard of him.
No.
He was a friend from school. He had in his basement, he had top shelf gear. He had a Music Man stack and all the latest pedals, and he had skills. He'd play Rush and UFO and songs, guitar oriented hard rock songs. And I'd go to his house and just watch him play and pick his brain. And he was very sharing.
Hmm.
And he actually lives in Delaware, plays in some bands out there, and I'm sure he's very successful. But I
Hmm.
mean, in business,
Yes,
but a great player and inspiring.
that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And you study with some people.
Not really. I mean, I took some lessons at Campbell's Music from John Farmer. He taught me some country bluegrass riffs
Okay.
and some rock riffs. I saw in your thing earlier where China Grove was one of the songs you learned. That's one of the songs he was showing me with the suspended chords and stuff. And
Yeah.
but really, it was by sticking my nose in books,
Uh-huh.
surrounding myself with better players
Yeah.
that made me what made me better. I
Yeah.
never really had any
I couldn't
formal.
imagine. I couldn't imagine how long you would stick with John Farmer because he's a legend in these parts, but he's known as a bluegrass legend.
He's a multi instrumentalist,
Yeah. Well,
and he knew
banjo.
right off the
Yeah.
bat that I wanted to play more rock,
Yeah.
but I wanted also to do what he did, which I never could. I mean, he played fiddle, banjo,
Yeah.
guitar. I don't even think there's anything he can't play.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you know was it his nephew was Jason? Did you know
Yep.
him?
I did.
Yeah, yeah. He
That's a
ended up moving
soul.
to LA and played in a bunch of punk bands.
Yep.
And he'd come down when I rehearsed with when we were first putting Cry Tough together. He lived down in Windsor, and he would always come and hang out.
Yeah.
And he was a great guy.
Yeah.
I didn't realize he was related to John. I didn't even know until he died. I didn't know that he was related to John.
Yep. Yep. I guess all the farmers are related in that neck of the woods.
Yeah. A
In those,
lot of farmers in Dallas town and that part
yeah.
of the country. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a big family.
Yeah.
So your earliest bands were what? What were some of your earliest bands? You said Full Tilt?
Well, the first band I put together, and I was pretty much the band mother, was a little thing called Full Tilt. I grabbed a buddy of mine that as a singer. Dave Stamen was his drummer that played in some local bands. And actually, Robbie Strine, if you know him, he played in Rock's Gang. He was the
Yeah.
bass player. And I was 18, and I was just and I got a rehearsal. I got an corner office at this upholstery store downtown in York that I rented for $50 a month. And I bought PA, and I was the glue and the mother, and I whipped these guys for a year before we even did a first show at a restaurant. And then I whipped them some more, and then we did my first club gig, which was at Swizzles. I think I was about 19 then, and
Okay.
so I was underage. But then it was so much effort trying to keep these guys going that I just said, look, I'm gonna go to Baltimore and start auditioning for bands. I thought I was ready at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
I wanted to work.
This what kind of music was this?
It was hard rock.
Okay.
It was AC/DC, UFO, Priest, stuff from the day, Aerosmith,
Yeah. Those were your earliest influences?
What's that?
Those were your earliest influences?
Well, I went through periods as I was learning. I went through my little jazz period and stuff like that. But of course, without being a learned musician, some of that was beyond me. So I found out I could play AC/DC really a lot easier
All right.
and get paid for it.
Yeah, yeah. It's certainly it's probably, if we're being honest, it's more entertaining. And I love jazz.
I mean, so many great musicians, especially jazz musicians, I mean, look at Jaco Pastores. He
Yeah.
basically died penniless in
Yeah.
Miami. And so many great players just don't get the recognition
Yeah.
or the wealth.
Yeah. One of my heroes was Kenny Burrell, and he's in his 80s, if not 90s, and he was homeless recently. And
Oh yeah, I was
the
homeless
music
for a stretch in Hollywood, and it
the
wasn't any
music
fun.
community had to the music community had to come together, and it's like we can't let these jazz icons go down like that.
No, it's a shame. Pop artists get rich, and a lot of them don't even play an instrument these days.
Yeah.
And then you have musicians that are just phenomenal that they don't get their day.
Did you say you were homeless for a period?
There was a stretch, after Brunette, or in between a stretch of Brunette, that I found myself in Hollywood, sleeping on a friend's floor. I was down to one guitar and one amp. I was playing in a couple bands, but at least I was in Hollywood. I wasn't freezing to death, and there was lots to do,
Yeah.
you know. But
Lots.
yeah, that was a stretch. I've had more lean years than good years.
All right. Well, you overcome.
I didn't
You're
I didn't
overcome.
come from money. I didn't come from anything. Everything I had, I earned.
Yeah. That. So after Full Tilt, you went down to you were like Maryland bands. Is this where London comes from?
I started auditioning for bands in Maryland,
Yeah.
and I went out to Western Maryland, to Tawnytown, Maryland, to this ice company where this drummer lived, and I went out and auditioned there with these guys from Baltimore, and these guys were seasoned pros, and I got the gig by we were playing songs, and we did Bottoms Up by Van Halen, and I did the solo, and I stopped. I turned around, and these guys are staring at me. I'm like, what did I do wrong? And they were like, do you always move like that? I'm like, what do you mean? And so I got the gig. Plus, I had a flying V, and the other two guitar players had flying V, so we all three had flying V.
Okay. It was like accept.
Yeah, yeah, sort of, yeah.
Yeah. So
But I
that
got
was who was that? What band was that?
that was London.
Okay.
London
There are three guitar players in London.
Larry Orff was the guitar player, because they hired Larry just before me, and then they hired me and decided to go. Then there was this other guitar player, Tom something, I can't remember his last name. He's the one that put the band together and had the investors and all that. Then Adrian Grimes was the singer. We had a couple different bass players. Gene Ingham was the one that was in the early. There was basically two versions of London. The first year was one lineup, and the second year was a completely different lineup.
Yeah.
I was the only person in from beginning to end, and I never started the band, but I did every show and every rehearsal and all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. So the second version of London included Bugs.
The second version had Larry, had Michael Stancliffe,
Mm-hmm.
had Timmy Gilliams, and it had Frankie Toth on drums, all Maryland cats.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how was it? How was it to play with Larry?
Larry was an amazing player, and he was a great friend. He was a
Yeah.
great guy. He ended up leaving after the first year to go to Berkeley and get a degree and all that. But I mean, he's a great guitar player. He still plays around and teaches down in Falls Church,
Mm-hmm.
and he took time, and because of course when you play in a two guitar band, you have to complement each other. And so
Yeah.
he was a guy that we'd sit down and figure what parts to play. Either the high register, the low register,
Mm-hmm.
complementary chords. Michael Stancliffe was the same way too. He would
Now how was
he
he?
oh, he's great tone, great player. I owe a lot to Mike. Mike got me a lot of a lot of great auditions.
All right.
He'd pass on auditions. He'd be like, Chris, these guys are looking for a guitar player. Here's the number. Call them up. I told him about you. And I'll be forever indebted. He got me auditions with what would become Poison, also the Killerhit, which would become Brunette, a few other things.
Was he helping you with Poison when they were Poison or Paris?
This is before they were anything. This is when they
Oh,
were
it's in
rehearsing up
Paris.
in Duisburg. I went up to Ricky Rocket's mom's house or his parents' house
Okay.
and went in the basement.
Mechanicsburg.
It was Ricky, Bobby, and Brett, and we wrote a song on the spot. I mean, Ricky and Bobby were 18, Brett was 19. I was probably 22 at the time, and they didn't have a band name. They didn't have a business plan. I told them I wanted to go to LA. They're like, "Wow, really?" And then I said, I'm Cry Tough is dissolving. London's dissolving. I'm starting this new band, Cry Tough. So I was in London. They named their band Paris, and then the first single they had was called Cry Tough. You got to cry
Yeah.
tough out of the streets to make your dreams happen. So
That was as Poison. Did they have that song? Did they
they
have
wrote
that?
that song after I passed on it. So I must have had some influence.
I've had this conversation with people before because there's a Cry Tough spelled the same way on the LA Strip,
There was, in fact,
and Kyle Kelly was the drummer.
who's that?
He's a guy from the Columbus, Ohio area. He was the drummer, and he said they got their name from the Poison song, and they spelled it the same way.
I know. And actually, I saw that pop up on one of my groups, and I did a screenshot of it because I don't ever remember them in LA when I was there.
Yeah,
I remember the band Tuff. I used to hang out with those guys,
yeah,
they didn't make much of a splash, I don't believe.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what was okay? So London, after London, what happened there? What was the deal with London?
It ran its course. Michael was leaving to go join a dirty
Dirty
deal, a record deal, and he was going to play with them guys. These guys were in other bands down there, and again they were doing a record. I think they had a deal with Atlantic or something, and so Michael left to do that. Um, uh, it had run its course, you know. Yeah.
So you and Bugs made
Bugs.
were the seed of Cry Tough. We're
Yeah.
talking about 1983, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but cracked up 83. I was in from like 83 and 84. I was in just for maybe about 2 years, and I knew Frankie since we were kids. Well, since teenagers, we worked at a gas station in York together, and he went
So did
Frankie.
half of the musicians in York County. That was
Yeah,
like the
they
rocker
called it
station.
Station of the Stars, but it was John Skip worked there. If you know him, he's an author now,
Yeah,
but he's a great guitar player and songwriter
yeah,
from East York area.
yeah. Where's he living now?
He was living in LA for quite a while. He's living up in Portland now,
Okay.
and he writes. Him and Craig Spector ended up getting writing some horror novels, so he became a fairly successful author in the zombie genre.
All right. Okay, so Cry Tough 83 and 84. So you were with uh those guys. So how was that? How did that get started?
Well, London was ending, and we wanted to do something else, and so we started picking people. Bugs wanted to have a two guitar. I wanted one guitar, but he wanted two guitars, so we auditioned some guitar players. We actually drove out to Columbus, auditioned this one guitar player, but again, logistics was one thing, so we hired John Calian, and me and John became best friends.
Yeah.
And he brought up Mark Matthias, who was actually the drummer, a drummer friend of his from Western Maryland, and we just rehearsed our ass off and went out playing, went right back on the road. We weren't off the road for that long. London did a lot of road work. Cry Tough probably did more.
Yeah. I remember Cry Tough live at Votech.
Yeah, we did play a show there. Yeah.
Yeah.
We opened for a lot of great bands. We played up at Hershey Arena, opening for Aerosmith. We played when the Shrine first opened up. We opened for, I think we opened for Metal Church there. We opened, I think, for Halloween. And Swizzles are open for an autograph and a bunch of people. So
Yeah, yeah. So
their gig was a big charge. It was
I remember.
blast.
Yeah, that
First arena
was that
gig.
done with mirrors. Period.
I think so. It's when they all got back together and they tried to tour sober,
Yeah.
and that was amazing. Yeah,
Okay, were they sober?
they were, they were, and then really nice guys. Tom
Yeah.
Hamilton and Steven Tyler were really nice. Steven and I hung out in L.A. for a couple times, and just great guys. You know.
I don't know. So you know this that one of the people that had the biggest uh, effect on my life at a very early age was Frankie from
Really?
from Cry Tough because he took me and you remember Matt Mead?
I remember the name. Yeah.
Okay, so he's one of the ones that worked at the gas station. He was a drummer. He's
Okay.
Mikey Mead's brother. So he took us under his wing, and so we were writing songs in Mike's bedroom, and he was the first guy that, hey, come over here. I have a 4-track. Let's record this stuff. And he would record. We had lyrics, and he would sing the lyrics over top of it. And these were the first songs I ever wrote were with Frankie. So I'm
What year was
always,
this?
huh?
What year was this?
This was after you left Cry Tough. That was at their rehearsal hall. This was probably what 85.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
first songs I ever wrote. He recorded it. I remember the song was called "Circles of Love," "Circle of Love." At the time, it was cheesy, but it was a start because a lot of people don't know it, but not everybody shares. Some people are completely competitive, and they
Yeah,
think
some people are very guarded about their riffs
yeah.
and things like that.
Frankie was completely open, and he
You
like
know,
here, come over.
Frankie, I love Frankie. He's a great guy.
I am completely.
He's a kind soul.
I remember the Saints in my life, and he was one
Yeah.
of them. I was one
Yeah,
of them.
it's funny because like I put Cry Tough together to take to L.A. and then early on they decided they didn't want to go to L.A. They wanted to just stay in the area,
Mm-hmm.
and then I left and went to L.A. and then I'm walking through Home Depot in the Valley, and then I run into Frankie. I'm like, "What are you doing here?" He's like, "I've been here for like a year," and he was playing in some bands out there,
Okay.
and then he came out to visit years later, and we hung out. His daughter was going to MI. I think she's still in MI,
Yeah.
and
She's an MI.
yeah.
Wow. I didn't see. I don't know. I don't know any of that. I didn't know any of that.
Oh yeah, she's got a great voice. She's been making videos and putting those out, and she's got a very promising career. She's got great songs, very pleasing voice, and I think she'll do well.
This is wonderful. The legacy.
Yeah.
Legacy. So anyway, so we got to move on. But after you left Cry, you probably left Cry Tough because they didn't have the same goals for going out to LA as you did.
Pretty much, yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay. So then came from there you got the audition for Killerhit.
Yeah. Michael called me, and I went out to Lancaster, and I went down in their basement, but they had a rehearsal studio, recording studio, and they had some shows and showcases up in New York, and they handed me about I don't know, maybe 20 or to 40 songs, original material, and they're like, "We got a show in 2 weeks. Learn this stuff." And I was like, "Okay." So that's when I first started writing cheat sheets,
All right.
because I couldn't. I mean, I
There's no way
couldn't.
you were going to do 40 songs that quickly.
Yeah, and I got caught the flu during that 2 weeks, so I'm sitting there miserable, just trying to learn this stuff, and then we went up to New York and played in Long Island and played in Queens, and that's where they thought that's where they had contacts, and they thought we'd get signed through that scene,
Yeah.
but it didn't pan out, and I said, "Let's go to California," and they're like, "Okay."
Yeah. So Killerhit in the area was huge in New York area in that time.
I've been seeing them play since that. Johnny was like 11 and Joe was like 14, and they would play Swizzles. I just happened that was my Cheers. So I'd go in there.
Mine too.
yeah, and I'd see these guys, and I was like, oh well, these guys are that more than novelty because they actually had energy, especially Johnny,
Yeah,
and
Jojo.
especially when he would come out front and play guitar and sing, and he'd do "Dirty White Boy,"
Yeah,
and it raised up the energy level considerably.
yeah,
That's when I changed the band name from Killerhit to Brunette. And they're like, we got to hire a singer. I'm like, no, Johnny's going to be the singer, and we're going to hire a drummer.
yeah. Who said you had to hire a singer?
Well, when we got there and we started showcasing and playing around, and we invited record labels and managerial people down, and they're like, because JoJo was playing rhythm guitar
Yeah,
and singing some. Johnny was singing from behind the drums, and he kept his drums up high, so you really couldn't see him. And
yeah,
they're like, and back then, image was everything,
yeah,
image. So they're like, you need a front man. And these guys like, we got to get a front man. We got to. I said, no, man, we got a front man. I
yeah.
said, Johnny is a
You need a
natural
drummer.
front man.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
gonna.
absolutely. He
It's
would
gonna
get
be
behind
easy.
it. He would get off the drums and play guitar.
Yeah,
'Cause he's like multi instrumentalist.
yeah.
Okay, and
And
then
it was the best thing he ever did.
yeah, and he was yeah. I remember that. I remember that. And both of those guys had. Did they have opera training? Because they would hit all those shrill like Jeff Tate kind of.
JoJo had an incredibly strong falsetto. He
Yeah.
could hit amazingly high notes. And John, they just had a natural ability. I mean,
Okay.
these guys are just natural singers.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. So
Johnny had the camber and had the and Joe sounded like more like Halford, with the strong vibrato, and Johnny just had the rock star voice.
yeah, yeah. So for those of you who don't know, that they became those two brothers had formed after Brunette Hardline
Yeah, yeah.
with
Right after Brunette ended, their sister was dating and eventually married Neil Schon,
okay.
and so and she put them together, and they did the hard line. They did one tour, they 1 year worth of tours with Van Halen, opening for Van Halen, and just in the States, and and then Neil didn't want to continue it because it didn't end up being a huge hit or anything, and so they ended up Johnny took it, and I guess they got very popular in Italy because they're Italians,
Yeah.
and so he still has the band in Italy as an entire Italian band. They play festivals out there,
Yeah.
and I guess they have a new album coming out.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. It's funny because I teach, as you know, I'm teaching a heart Sherry or whatever.
Hot Cherie, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I'm teaching that. Like this is 30 years later, so it's timeless. And I saw them in Lidditz.
That song made its rounds. I mean, Danny Spanos had a moderate hit with it in the early '80s, probably like '83,
So
and
that
then
that was a cover.
oh yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
never
We
knew.
didn't write it. Yeah, we didn't write it. It was written by some other cats, and then we did our version.
Okay, so Hot Cherie was originally a Brunette tune.
No, no, it was written by some actual
Not,
songwriter.
but Brunette played it.
Brunette played it. Yes, yes, I learned it, and we played it. But then they carried that over to Hardline, and then of course Neil did his guitar work, which is superb on it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So after Brunette, so what happened with Brunette? Was that
Um,
because of Hardline? Was that?
yeah, again. It ran its course. I mean, it ran for about 6 years.
Hmm.
Um, I was in it for 4, and then I came back for some tours and some showcases. In the meantime, I was playing in a band called Shame from
Hmm.
LA, and then they reached out to me, asked me to come back in, so I did, and and uh, and then again, at that time was when everybody was getting dropped in LA.
Yeah,
All the attention was going to Seattle. No one gave a rat's butt about LA at that point. In fact, you couldn't even at that time, if you played a power chord, people looked down on you. If you played fast, if you played 30-second notes,
Yeah.
people looked down on you. You know,
Yeah.
you had to play you had to change your style, you know.
Yeah. And did you? Is that did you? Uh,
I did. I started writing, and I started using some of the chord knowledge I had, and tried to peel away from the root 6 and root 5 bar chords and go to open chords and broken chords and triads and things like that,
yeah.
and again, stack chords on top of each other for a fuller sound
Yeah.
instead of playing a bunch of different power chords on top. And again, if it wasn't for Michael and Larry, I wouldn't have had some of that knowledge to glean from.
Yeah. Yeah. So after okay, so you had Brunette and Shame. Some of the there was some overlap there, and then
Yeah,
after that was it with Red Rebel Devils?
Red Rebel Devils. This guy that I was roommates with, who eventually became the Red Rebel Devils manager, turned me on to Steve Stiles, the singer from up above Santa Barbara, and he was a young kid, about 21. I was probably 31 at the time, and we sat down and started writing a bunch of songs, and uh, and um, and I was doing some showcases for this girl Christina Laree, and the rest of the band that she had, that they wanted to put a band together. So I took Styles, some of the guys from her band, and put this thing together. And he already had the working name Red Rebel Devils,
Okay.
and we started playing around LA, and wrote a ton of songs, really good stuff, really good kind of southern rock, kind of like Guns N' Roses meets Black Crows with a little bit of gospel-y influence.
Yeah.
It was a blast,
I love the mixtures of stuff.
Yeah,
When you start getting into the mixtures, that's when the when the originality comes. So that's
absolutely.
I know it probably was rooted from the fact that uh, the original scene had been abandoned by the record label, but that's that is my thing.
It was tough.
The mixing of stuff.
You probably know Chris Thorne, right?
I do.
Yeah. Well, Chris came to LA. I didn't. I mean, Chris and I used to hang out in York when I was teaching a few people. Chris would come by, but he knew a lot at the time, and I guess he came to LA. But he was one of the guys that went to Seattle when I stayed in LA. I mean, I didn't hang out with him in LA, but then that was good for him because he did the Blind Melon stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
He's still riding that,
yeah.
and he's back in LA. He's got a recording studio. We hung out a little bit a few years ago. I went down to Silver Lake to see him play and everything, and he's a great guy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's somebody I would love to interview.
You should. You
Yeah,
should.
yeah. So Chris Thorne was for everybody who doesn't know, the Blind Melon of No Rain fame. When he was in York, he was in a thrash band.
Yeah, he played in rock. Frank Kennel and I were jamming together, and he wanted me to join the band. I'm like, Frank, I got to leave this town.
Yeah, yeah,
And Frank was super cool, and that's when Chris Thorne came into that band
yeah.
along with some other guys, and they played the Battle of the Bands at the fairgrounds.
So
and
Chris studied with you.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't teach him a whole lot because I didn't know a whole lot.
Oh, you say that, but
I showed him everything I knew.
yeah,
But I mean, within a few months, I'm like, Chris, man, I really can't do much for you.
yeah,
You're good. Go play. Go play
yeah,
with people. Go seek people that are better,
yeah,
and just keep playing.
yeah. You're wonderful. So let's see. You also played bass, which I never knew.
I did. I got a call. I was in this band called Ghost Town. I put together with Chris Post. He was with Dillinger. They had a couple albums out on Polygram.
Dillinger, what is Dillinger?
Dillinger was a band from L.A. Chris is from New England, but they were a band that was like a cross between Leonard Skinner and Bon Jovi from L.A. and great songs. Chris, amazing singer. He almost got the gig in the Joe Perry project, but he didn't play guitar. So he ran home, learned to play guitar, came back, but he still didn't get that gig, and he moved to LA.
Yeah.
So we hooked up. We were neighbors, and we had mutual friends. So we started writing songs. We lived across the street from each other, and he moved to Nashville in about '94. He came back in '95, and we started rehearsing and put this and writing songs, and I was engineering, producing, and we wrote a ton of songs. Put this band together with different people over the years. We had the band together about 8 years,
Yeah.
and we played around LA. We couldn't do a lot of road work because he owned a company and he couldn't go out on the road.
Mm-hmm.
But we had a lot of great players. We had the drummer from Survivor in the band at one point. Um, we had a we had a bunch of different players, but he and I were the nucleus.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he had this other band he was working in the early 2000s called The Constant, and they had a side project called Das Butt that was like a punk metal band, and they wanted me to play bass in The Constant, and I'm like, no, I'm not really into it. And but I said, I dig your band Das Butt. I'd be happy to play bass in that. And it's like,
How did
okay.
they know you would be a good bass player?
They didn't, and I didn't know. But I owned some basses because I'd play bass in the studio for lack of having a bass player just to get trapped around.
Yeah.
But it was I played with the pick, and it was metal, so it wasn't a lot of walking.
Yeah.
And it was just basically follow the guitar and the bass drum, and that was pretty much it. And that was a lot of fun. We had a lot of good songs, a lot of fun stuff. It was kind of, it's hard to pigeonhole it, but it was kind of it was just good. There's some stuff out there. It's hard to find though.
Yeah. Yeah. Love all the videos you sent, by the way. They're fun.
Dude.
The brunette and what was it? The macaroni and cheese.
Yeah, that was the trailer from the movie we did. That's one thing when we landed in LA. I mean, New York, we were showcasing, nothing was getting off the ground. We landed in LA, played a couple shows as Killerhit. We were a metal band, and then I realized I said we got to be more commercial, and we got to change the name and work on the image. So once we changed the name, put Johnny out front, then things started to open up. Then we played Hollywood, and within no time at all, we were selling out. Right away, we got a movie deal with Francis Ford Coppola through Zoetrope Studio, his studio. We were on the road on tour, and we came back to town, and I'm down on the strip, and everybody's like, "Hey man, we got this movie deal." I'm like, "Really? Oh great!" And I walk a few steps. Someone else, "Hey Chris, man, we got this movie deal." And it turns out, it seemed like everybody in Hollywood had gotten this movie deal. And I'm like, and then we played a show at Gazzari's. End of the show, these people come backstage and they're like, "Hey, we want you to be in a movie." And I'm like, I think everybody in Hollywood's in your movie. I said, so and so and so and so. They're like, "Yeah, we wanted to find a band to be in it, but we couldn't find a band that could act. So we were handpicking people from different bands."
Yeah.
And like, we could read for it. So we read for it and got the movie and
you could play that role. So actors among your
It was about a band that moved from the East Coast to the West Coast and the trials and tribulations. It was kind of a spin-off, Hard Day's Night by the Beatles.
Yeah, but the Sunset Strip version of it.
Exactly. And they shot the whole movie. We had a rap party. It was never released. We did a soundtrack for it at Cherokee Studio with Dana Strum from Vinnie Vincent and Slaughter recording, and a lot of good material came out. Bobby Rock played drums on it, and Mark Slaughter played did some of the backups and actually did one of the intros to one of the songs on guitar, and it was a blast. I mean, Blue Murder was doing their album at the time at the same studio, and it was a very exciting time.
Synergy. You moved to LA. That there's all kinds of synergy. That was the thing there.
The energy was off the charts, and it was incredible. I mean, yeah, I mean, Guns N' Roses. Everybody was getting signed. Everybody was getting
Yeah.
signed.
Yep. So Das Butt. All right. So what are you up to now?
Oh, a lot. I mean, I'm
So you've always been a writer. Is that right?
always did songwriting. All during Cry Tough, I started recording and producing some songs, and that's what I wanted to. I wanted to come to LA. I wanted to get a certain amount of notoriety, and then parlay that into producing. And so I this is my studio I built here in Tennessee, and and so this is what I spend a lot of my time here writing, recording, producing individuals, and just creating.
Yeah.
Especially with the COVID, you have to keep busy.
Yeah.
And I had a studio in LA, and of course I was recording, producing, and writing all the Ghost Town stuff, and and so
So how'd you learn that? Are you is it like a Pro Tools studio or?
I'm running Sonar, but I have a friend that taught at MI, that taught live sound and digital recording. He built my first rig, which I loaded up real fast and just started, and it became inadequate. So he built my next rig, which I'm still operating to this day.
All right.
Um, but I always had reel to reels and analog gear and stuff. In fact, I'm incorporating analog along with digital just because it's really hard to drop the analog stuff. I like outboard gear as much as I like plugins.
Yeah, of course.
But I only know a percentage of what to do, but I can get tracks down and I can get it done.
All right.
But always, like you said, you're always learning.
Yeah.
And technology is a beast.
Oh, yes, it is.
But
we are the same in that way. Every new technological thing is hard won for me. But
So about 5 years ago, a friend of mine, that's ZZ Top's tour manager, a friend of mine from LA, he was selling his house south of Nashville, and I said, I said, well, that's very interesting, and he asked if I would be interested, and then I get a call 2 days later from some guys I used to play with in Red Rebel Devils. They've been in Nashville for about 18 years, and they asked if I would play in this project. So I said, I think I need to go to Nashville. So I hopped a plane a few days later, came out and hung out for a week. And I said, well, I think I need to relocate. So I bought the house, came out here, and I've been spending probably about 80% of the year here in Tennessee and just meeting folks, writing songs, producing and collaborating and trying to stay relevant,
of course. So does your studio have auto tune?
I have an auto-tune pedal, and auto-tune is one of the features, on the digital recording. And if I'm doing some vocals, I might put a slight bit on, but I don't use it as an effect.
Yeah.
But it does help, just like gates and limiters and compression helps,
Yeah. That, in other words, everything nowadays, like I was just commenting and caught hell for talking about how they auto-tuned Darius Rucker's wagon wheel.
Yeah, I saw that. Saw that.
Yeah, it's like I don't hate necessarily auto-tune, but it's like he already had a fine voice. You made him sound like a robot. Shame on you.
Yeah, I hate that aspect of it. To use it for an effect is one thing. To use it to assist in pulling notes in, there's a place for it. It helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In my own band, we used auto-tune on a song, and we used it kind of like a wah-wah pedal.
Yeah.
It was literally, we weren't making any, it was a funk band, so we weren't making any bones about it. Of course it's auto-tune. The human voice does not do this.
Absolutely.
So I like it in that way too. So so tell us about the pit crew.
the Pit Crew was the band I came out here to play in. They had a Trigger, the drummer from Red Rebel Devils. Him and his brother are both prolific songwriters. His brother plays keyboards and guitar. Trigger sings and plays drums, and he had this brainchild for this band that was motorsports related, and they had a lot of contacts in the motorsports industry. So he said, let's do this band, and it's going to be like a hard country band, and we'll become a corporate band, and we'll do these corporate gigs for good money.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, that sounds like something to do. And he came over and played me some of the songs and some of the ideas he had. So he came to LA. We recorded about 8 songs out there, and then at my studio, and then we came back to Tennessee, and we started playing some shows and fine tuning it, rehearsals, and then he got married, started having kids. His brother started having kids. That started taking more of their time. And then COVID happened. I mean, we actually went into a studio here in Nashville and did the whole next album, which is ready to be released. We just haven't released it because unless you can tour to support it, it's kind of futile at this moment.
Yeah.
But it's a relevant genre that we can release at any time. And everybody should go to the pitcrewband.com, all lowercase,
Mm-hmm.
give a listen to it, get an idea, sign up to the website.
Yeah.
Because at some point in time, we're going to go out and we're going to kick it around and take it on the road.
That's wonderful. Now, here's a question for you. When you were not gigging as a musician, I hear you were like a stagehand. Was it? Tell me the extent of your stagehand experience.
Yeah, during the later 2000s and 2010s, I took some time off. You know, I was still writing songs, but I wasn't actively looking for a band. So, of course, we have to work, you know, and pay the bills. I've worked so many jobs. I don't care to think about it. I've been a carpenter, a union carpenter. But I ended up working for the local stagehands union in LA. IATSE 33, and I was working at the Forum and at the Staples Center and at theaters, and they realized that I was a musician and that I'd be best suited to do backline and be on stage because I had experience in that. Plus, I had done some guitar teching for a guitar player who played in David Lee Roth's first band after Van Halen, Bart Walsh. He was from the Carolinas. He was in LA. Amazing Van Halen-ish guitar player. He died a couple years ago, but I was his guitar tech for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And but it was a job.
When was this?
This was in I started working with him. It was probably the late '90s. Right after, and he was the first guitar player in Atomic Punks, which is the first Van Halen tribute band. That band became what's that band? That novelty rock band that's out there. Ralph Sands sings for it. Atomic Punks became what are they called? They're still touring to this day. I think Paul Schaefer writes a lot of their songs.
Who?
Steel Panther.
Oh, all right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, this would have been in the late '90s, and then in the 2000s, and I started working for the Stagehands Union in probably maybe right after the Carpenters Union, so maybe about 2010. I started working for the Stagehands Union.
Okay.
But I saw a lot of great shows, met some cool people. There was a lot of great musicians and people that were working at that time for the union. But it was frustrating because I really wanted to just be on stage.
Right. So you went through your I don't even say location, but through your life. It was like Gene Simmons and you met George Burns, and
When I was in Shame, they got signed to Gene Simmons' label.
okay.
Well, I joined Shame. It's crazy because I joined Shame. I already knew some of the guys from hanging out in the bars in L.A. and they asked me to play guitar, so I was like, okay. So not even 24 hours later, I didn't even meet the singer. The singer was on vacation in Hawaii. So I joined the band one day, and they told me that night, oh, by the way, we're playing a show. Gene Simmons is having a New Year's party at this bowling alley in Burbank, and he wants us to play because we're his latest signed act. I'm like, okay, well, your singer's not even in the country. Well, he's in Hawaii. So we went over there and ended up playing um, a bunch of their songs, and the rhythm guitar player sang them, which is an amazing singer.
Mm-hmm.
And we got signed to their label.
How was Gene Simmons? How was he?
Gene, Gene's Gene. He's a perfectionist. He's cut and dry.
Uh-huh.
He's not a warm person, but he would come to our rehearsal and he had a lot of great ideas and a lot of great inspiration.
Uh-huh.
But it was weird at the party. Kiss played in their street clothes with bowling shoes on, and it was. I'm like, this is just surreal.
This was who was in the band at this point?
Nobody you'd know. John Ward was a singer from Birmingham, England. Mace Byers was a bass player. He went on to play with Bennington from Lincoln Park at a band from Arizona.
Okay.
And just a bunch of cats you never heard of.
Okay.
But they had great songs while I joined the band. They had great songs. At one point, Gene handed us a whole bunch of gear, handed us a mixing a board, an old Akai recorder, some mics and cables, and said, go record a bunch of new songs. So they didn't know how to work it. So we went into Hollywood Hills at the rhythm guitar player's girlfriend's house, and I set everything up. And in a month, I produced and engineered 18 more songs, and we handed them over to Gene. Gene put us on salary at 150 a week per person, it's for us to live on, which is next to nothing.
Right.
But we handed him the songs. Then Kiss's album Hot in the Shade came out, and Gene's like, hey, I got to go tour to support this album. I need my money back. And we're like, what do you mean you need your money back? He's like, yeah, I need it. He goes, comes up to about 15 grand. And that's when I was homeless and all that. I'm like, Gene, we don't have this money. We've been living on this money, He's like, well, he goes, if you in the contract, I can take your material then. Okay. And he took like their 60 songs, the 18 songs we just wrote, all this stuff, and he promptly dropped us from his label. Plus, he had lost his distribution with BMG at the time.
Okay.
So that was a lesson learned.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So that I am somehow not surprised. I hear he's a nice guy, but then I hear, I know of him, so that doesn't surprise me. He understands.
I was at his house many times, met his wife, and he had his new baby then, and all that stuff. This was long before their reality show and everything. And again, Gene was full of insight, but while he wasn't mean, he wasn't a warm person. Again, it was all business. It was all business.
Yeah. So here's the one thing I will say about you that I've learned that I did not know. As far as your influences go, you're not just the metal guy. You're not just the metal guy like back in the day. So your Johnny Winters, you had your Dwayne Allmans, your Claptons, your Billy Gibbons, Ronnie Wood, Lowell George, all those kinds of stuff. I never knew that your well was that deep.
I love great guitar players. It's always gone to that guitar sound.
Yeah.
Leo Kottke with his 12-string slide.
You're a nerd. You're a guitar nerd.
I am. I'm a gear hound too. I love guitars. I love amps. I love pedals. I mean, I'm always, it's anything to inspire me,
Yeah, yeah. So Jeff Beck, Al Di Meola, Larry Carlton, Lee Ritenour, Alan Holdsworth. See, I never would have known this. Okay.
Oh yeah,
I remember,
yeah. I mean,
as I said, I remember you practicing in the back of music scene. I didn't know what that spider finger business was all about. You look like
yeah,
you knew what you're, huh?
you
Smoking
just had to
mirrors,
play. You
huh?
had to during that era. You had to play fast,
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yep. So, thank you so much, Chris. Thank you so much for this. And
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate
yeah,
that.
this is enlightening for everybody, and it means a lot to me, because we have a history, even though you didn't really know me from like back in the music scene days.
Well, but I drop into your shows now and
Yep.
again.
Yeah,
Here and
yeah,
there.
yeah.
I'm in town
Yep.
and all. And I hope you continue on with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you
Absolutely.
ever
I'm a
want to
lifer.
collaborate, if you ever want to collaborate,
I
I'm always
do.
around.
I'm
You
just
should
gonna
come
throw it
down
out
to
there. I do.
you should come to Nashville and check it out. It's pretty impressive. A lot of energy.
Hmm.
There's great players. It's a vocal town as well as a guitar town.
Yeah.
And,
You're the second person in 24 hours that has told me that.
with your knowledge, with your schooling and all that, I mean, you could stay busy here. You really could.
Yeah. Well, thank you, and I will. This next period in my life is going to see travel.
Bought a house in Florida too a couple months ago, and I'm planning on playing that circuit down there because Florida never closed up. You can play year round. There's more than enough clubs. Plus, a lot of people I know live down there.
Hmm.
So I always like reaching out to old friends and old bandmates.
Yeah, I'll be down in Florida in late July this year.
What part?
Uh, Coral? Is a
Coral Gables?
Cape? Let me see.
Well, I bought a house north of Tampa, in Crystal River on the water.
Uh huh.
And it's kind of centrally located.
Cape Coral.
Cape Coral, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm not. I think that's on the Atlantic side, right?
I think it might even be. It might even be. I have no idea, to be honest with you.
I'd have to look it up. I'm not sure what it is,
Yeah.
but well, we'll have to make a plan
Yep.
to hang out down there too.
Absolutely. I will be, and I will be making trips. I will be the Nashville thing will happen.
Hit me up. Stay at the house. I'll
Okay.
take you around and introduce you to some people.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rod. I really
Okay.
appreciate it.
All righty. Thanks.